literally anybody you see who's trying to tamp down enthusiasm for the Bernie and AOC rallies or the Tim Walz town halls or the Ro Khanna town halls, anybody who's doing that, dismiss them. They are not your ally. They are your enemy. Because if you can't look at the most effective resistance to Donald Trump and say, hey, despite my disagreements with it, obviously these people are correct on the broader question and we should back them right now. If they can't do that, they're not an ally. They are an enemy. I've even seen some fake lefties doing the same thing, where they act like, oh, Bernie's going to sell us out and Bernie's not good enough. If they are saying that, they are your enemy. They are not your ally. Be careful of people trying to hijack this moment.
You know what I mean? I think people like sincerity. I think people can tell when you're bullshitting. I think people can tell when you're fronting and you're putting on some sort of veneer. And Kyle is as authentic as it gets. And so is Bernie Sanders. And I think that's why they're married at the hip. And I think that that's why, as you see this Bernie-sance going on, the number one wave surfer is Kyle Kulinski. As you said, he's setting the tone for everyone else to follow. And I'm really glad that he put out this video that we're going to react to, because I think there's a lot of noise on the left right now where there are a ton of people who are desperate to find something to be critical of when it comes to Bernie Sanders. There's a bunch of people who are desperate to throw cold water on this momentum.
On progressivism in general.
100%. And Kyle is having none of it. He's taking no prisoners. He is vanquishing all of his foes and our foes. And we're very happy to have this man crusading on our side.
Oh, yeah, 100%, 100%. I was really glad to watch this, or see it rather, kind of embedded within a larger discussion he was having about an MSNBC exchange between Simone Sanders and a pro-Clinton Democrat who was trying to pour water all over the Bernie message, and specifically Bernie using the word oligarch. This guy on MSNBC was basically making the ridiculous argument that normal people, people in middle America, they don't even know what oligarchy is. They don't even know what oligarchy means. And Simone Sanders had to be like, well, then why are they all showing up to these rallies in middle America called Fight Oligarchy? Like, I think they understand the point if they're showing up in mass. Either way, it was weird to see Simone Sanders
winning her back, baby.
Yeah, of course, she was Bernie's press secretary in 2016, but then abandoned Bernie for Biden in 2020. So it is pretty funny to see her now back on MSNBC defending her OG boss, Bernie Sanders. Either way, Kyle got a little bit spicy in this clip, and apparently he's on vacation right now, which is why he's in a different or why he has a different background than normal. But clearly he's been scrolling a little bit, Zach, as we all do. Can't blame the guy even on vacation, He's been scrolling. He's been on Twitter. He sees what we see. And you all know what we're talking about. These annoying ass fucking leftists who want to spend their fucking time shitting on Bernie Sanders, shitting on AOC, trying to convince you that somehow it's a bad thing. And somehow you should be, not excited about the fact that Bernie Sanders and AOC are having historic rallies, attracting historic crowds in cities, not just in New York, not just in California, but all across this country, including in middle fucking America, places like Nebraska, places like Colorado, places like Iowa.
Warren, Michigan, a kind of a critical state to win in the future.
Yep. So, Zach and I, if you guys have been watching our show over the last couple of days, I'm sure you sense our frustration. We fucking hate this shit. We think it's annoying as fuck. We think it's counterproductive wrecker energy. Have frankly no tolerance for it at this point. I will not abide this bullshit. And thank God Kyle feels the same way.
Yep, absolutely. Look, if Kyle is the godfather of the Bernie bros, then we're the Michael Corleones. Okay, we are the Sonnies of the world. We're the foot soldiers of these guys, and we're ready to punish, bro. All right, we're taking a bat to your head if that's what it takes. I am leaving no prisoners either. We are ready to go to the mattresses, as they say, on behalf of Bernard Sanders. And I don't think we have a better option right now. And one thing that, Gavin, you mentioned when we were on our trail hike, right? Gavin and I have a lot of good talks on our trail hikes that we do. And you were like, I love being the left flank of the Democratic Party, right? But I'm not interested in being so far removed from reality that I can't be enthused or excited about the progress that is being made within the Democratic Party, right? And I think that that's where you and I have found ourselves in this political world. And that's where Bernie Sanders has found himself in this political world. And that's because we actually want to engage in American politics, right? I understand that it's constantly defeating, but we don't really have a choice, right? I read that post that Olayemi put on her YouTube page about how she tried so hard to warn people about how Donald Trump was going to be fucking awful for vulnerable people in this country, people without citizenship, right? And so many people batted her away. So many people poo-pooed her. So many people said that she was just shilling for liberals, right? And of course, we defended her the entire way. We also tried as hard as we could to drum up excitement for Kamala Harris, not because of who she was, but because who she was fighting against, right? Because we couldn't stand the reality of what we're going through right now. That was our position. I think it's been borne out as pretty good judgment. But, you know, now the rubber's meeting the road, and it's like, are you interested in fighting or are you interested in complaining? And when you look at thousands upon thousands of regular people who say, I desperately want to resist this, the only takeaway is that this is a very positive thing that we need to encourage, that we need to foster with every ounce of energy we have, and something that we need to celebrate.
Yep, 100%. That's very well said, Zach. And with that, let's take a look at Mr. Kyle Kulinski unloading, going scorched earth on, again, some of the most annoying, least productive members of the so-called left-wing coalition, which, again, mostly is a Twitter thing. Let's be real. This is mostly an online phenomenon that he's addressing, at least in my opinion, but let's take a look.
We discussed the other day, and I'm sure you've all seen like clips and pictures and videos from it. AOC and Bernie Sanders had just record-breaking rallies over the past few days. The reason why this is such an important story is because it's a mask-off moment. It's a true mask-off moment. And what I mean by that is the dividing lines are so fucking clear. Basically, anybody who says positive things about these rallies, in this moment right now, fighting Trump, they're an ally. They're an ally. They're on the right side. They're going to stand up and fight back against fascism. But by the same token, anybody who utters a peep of disagreement, they are not an ally. They are an enemy, right? Again, this is a mask-off moment where people are truly revealing their colors and showing you where they stand when the chips are down. They can see these things. So again, I want to reiterate, literally anybody you see who's trying to tamp down enthusiasm for the Bernie and AOC rallies or the Tim Walz town halls or the Ro Khanna town halls, anybody who's doing that, dismiss them. They are not your ally. They are your enemy. Because if you can't look at the most effective resistance to Donald Trump and say, hey, despite my disagreements with it, obviously these people are correct on the broader question and we should back them right now. If they can't do that, they're not an ally. They are an enemy. I've even seen some fake lefties doing the same thing, where they act like, you know, oh, Bernie's going to sell us out and Bernie's not good enough. So let me get this straight. Bernie's not good. We're staring down the barrel of fucking fascism right in front of our eyes. No due process, no habeas corpus, constitution shredded, colonialism and imperialism from the 1800s returning, a market crash based on horrible economic policies, a war on the working class, tax increase on the bottom 95% of Americans while you cut it for corporations and the wealthy. You're looking at all of that, and you're going to fucking nitpick the people leading the resistance. And in this moment, it's the left-wing Tea Party moment, y'all. We are not...
And I agree with Kyle, by the way. We have a little bit more of this to react to, but I agree. It is the left-wing Tea Party movement. And I'm not just referring to Bernie Sanders. I'm just referring to the general energy. There hasn't felt like this level of opposition to a president since Obama was in office. And since he took, not just Obama, but when the Democrats really took over, and then that freak out from the Republicans back in like 2008, 2009, that is really how it feels, just the reverse. And again, under the Tea Party era, I always kind of felt like maybe we thought it was a bigger deal than it really was because of where we lived, right? In the middle of the country, deep in, you know, Republican Bible Belt area.
A truly formative experience. I still remember at Johnson County Community College, there was a ginormous Tea Party protest, guys. And I remember driving home with my dad in the car from school. And I was like, what the fuck is going on over here? And he was like, that's their goddamn American right to protest, you know? And I was like,
you were arguing against that.
That's how my dad is. You know what I mean? Especially back in the day, he'd be like, that's fucking America, son. You know?
I mean, it is technically.
Yep.
No one's arguing.
I would be like, this is annoying. And he was like, that's freedom. They have the right to do that. And so do you. And I was like, all right, that's a good lesson, you know, whatever. But I think the left has such a problem, right? And of course, who are we talking about, right? At the Vanguard, we name names. Kyle's a little charitable. He's talking about Breonna Joy Gray, Bernie Sanders' former press secretary. He's talking about Jimmy Dore. He's talking about the Sabrina Salvatis of the world, the Sabby Sabses.
Do dissidents.
I forget that channel even exists, right? But they're just existing as a way of throwing cold water on any left movements. They have a holier than thou set of politics that is always going to move the goalpost so that they are unsatisfied and unhappy, right? They are determined to make the perfect the enemy of the good, right? And what we're being faced with now is a choice of, do you want to resist fascism? And there's no speculation about it, right? We are living under a white nationalist fascist regime right now. They are trying to destroy all of the pillars of our country. They're trying to take away Social Security. They're trying to abolish the Department of Education to make your kids dumber. Okay, they're trying to get rid of workplace protections at OSHA. They're trying to pass laws that make it even easier for corporations to scam you when they incorporate in Delaware. All right, look into that one. It's crazy. This is what they think the government should be doing. They think the government should be only there to steal from you, and yet you can't make up your mind if you think this democratic socialist who has done nothing but stand up for working people domestically in this country for 50 fucking years is not worth supporting, not worth rallying behind, then you're not ever going to find anybody that's worth rallying behind. Nobody is ever going to be good enough for you. And there's a reason why Simone Sanders is like, you know what? I even have to eat crow a little bit. Like, I'm going to come back to Bernie Sanders. I thought it couldn't be done, but he's got the moment meeting him right now. And I'm going to go there and I'm going to be in part of that pulpit again, because I do deep down believe in it, right? Even if she suppressed that part of herself for her own personal gain, her true colors are showing right now. Even if it is beneficial for her, I don't give a shit. I want somebody with a platform to continue to speak positively about Bernie Sanders. I think it's a good thing when MSNBC shows their rallies, because it shows we're winning. It shows that our ideas are mainstream. And you brought up Brian Tyler Cohen, who's the guy that we busted his balls a little bit. He kind of kissed Joe Biden's ass. I thought he could have held Joe Biden's feet to the fire. That guy's coming to our politics right now. He's saying, you know what, maybe Bernie and ARC are right. He has a huge platform. We need to be like, yes, thank you for joining the fold. Let's have a big tent politics. Let's engage with people who we know are going to show up to vote. That's why the rallies are getting bigger. We've talked about it. Bernie Sanders is going after likely voters this time around, and he's succeeding. And all you can do is try and blow on the embers and make sure that it turns into a wildfire of support, because Bernie Sanders can be a movement leader. He's done it before, and he's going to really bring it home this time.
Yeah, 100%. And he's kind of becoming that central figure in left-wing media in the same way that Trump was for right-wing media for so long. They were all united around him. It feels that way with Bernie right now, even though the guy's not technically running. He hasn't announced a run, but he also hasn't denied that he could in 2028, or at least get involved via the endorsement of a major player, someone like AOC. So I totally agree with Kyle. That's where we're at. Bernie is leading the resistance. Obviously, we'll see what happens by 2027, 2028. But assuming things are the way they are now, yeah, he's the fucking leader. And sorry, but you don't always get to pick who the fucking leader of any given movement is. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's not like everyone takes a vote and who do you want to lead this movement? No, sometimes people stand the fuck up. And a lot of times people follow that person who's standing the fuck up. In this case, it's Bernie. And luckily for us, Zach, for probably the first time in our fucking lives, it actually seems like the person that is the obvious leader of the left in this country, or at least of the Democratic Party, is someone who's pretty fucking closely aligned to a progressive left-wing worldview. Easily the most in our lifetime as far as possible candidates for the Democratic Party. Like, you're not going to get any better than Bernie Sanders. And even on the few issues where he does falter, I would still say he's much better than your average Democrat, than the other people that are on the table, the Pete Buttigieg, the Gavin Newsom, even the folks I like a John Ossoff.
Yeah, what I think is so incredible about Bernie Sanders is the fact that he first in 2015 shifted the Overton window, right? He made it so that people were starting to imagine again the possibility of universal health care, free college tuition at the state level, a Green New Deal, raising the minimum wage to a living wage, tackling climate change in an ambitious way, stop being involved in all of these endless overseas wars, investing in infrastructure, right? Bringing business back home, taking care of the American worker, not focusing on scapegoating against migrants, but actually tackling the problem at its root source, which is the production being outsourced overseas to exploit overseas workers, right? Bring that production back home and everybody would be better. These were the ideas that had been completely lost on the American people. They'd been beaten out of the political conversation, right? And he dragged the American Overton window over. Now I think he has dragged the American mainstream political view over. We are now constantly hearing people in just run-of-the-mill conversations. I'm not talking about me and Gavin and fringe library meeting groups. I'm talking about on viral TikToks. I'm talking about on regular Netflix shows. They're talking about the problems of capitalism. They're literally talking about capitalism by name. They're grieving about how hard and difficult our healthcare system is on national television in works of fiction, right? That's thanks to Bernie Sanders, right? The way that the Green New Deal, the resurgence of FDR style politics, that's all thanks to Bernie Sanders. And now it's not just part of the discussion. It's actually mainstream. It's actually relatively commonplace to agree with those ideas. And that's all thanks to Bernie Sanders. And he's done it in like a decade, guys. He's done it in like a decade. So if you're all ready to give up and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he didn't succeed already. Like, you did not have the stamina to be a part of this project to begin with, right? What he did was he lit a fire under the nation's ass, and now it's still burning. Right? We had to learn some hard lessons. Donald Trump had to get reelected twice, but even if he doesn't run for president, what he did was he kept us alive, right? I'll beat a dead horse and use this analogy one more time because I really like it. You know, I've been saying that we're like at the death zone of Mount Everest, right? 8,000 meters up, you can't survive. You start eating yourself, right? Your body needs oxygen. It's not getting enough, right? You have to shake yourself to stay awake because you can't fall asleep up there. You'll die. Bernie Sanders is shaking the American public and he's keeping us awake. And even if that's all he does, it's worth it.
Yeah, 100%. Also, I think it needs to be reckoned with that, like, after Donald Trump eventually is defeated, let's hope to God he is, someone's going to have to be there to pick up the pieces. And that's going to be really important because even if we don't get every single agenda item on Bernie's list accomplished, it is really going to be important that the person there to pick up the pieces is someone who's not just a neoliberal status quo fucking return to normalcy kind of guy, a Gavin Newsom, a Pete Buttigieg, because then we'd basically just be right back where we were when Trump was able to exploit that situation and take power in the first place. You have to have someone there who's able to rebuild an alternative, a future that has a vision, right? Who's not just, willing to go back to letting corporations run the show in this very neoliberal corporatist way. That ain't going to fix it. So yeah, it's really important. Again, whatever you disagree with Bernie on, he's not above criticism. We've spent many of the last 4 years of our career criticizing not just him, but AOC, and not just him and AOC, but the Justice Democrats and the whole progressive movement. Trust me, no one's been tougher on them than us. But here we are at this pivotal moment. And like Kyle's saying, and like we're saying, if anyone's going to clean up this mess and rebuild this country and give us a future that we could actually be somewhat excited about or optimistic about, it's definitely the progressives. Again, whatever your fucking criticism of them are, it's definitely the fucking progressives, the socialist types. So yeah, I'm with Kyle. I don't want to hear this nitpicking bullshit.
Oh yeah, everything that Bernie warned would happen has happened, and that's just another layer of credibility for the guy who's been beating the same drum for generations.
Playing around. We are not fucking around. So this is what I need everybody to understand. People are outing themselves in this moment. Take note. Anybody who's like, oh, for this reason and that reason and that reason, actually, it's not great that Bernie and AOC are shattering records and leading the resistance and showing us the way out of the wilderness. If they are saying that, they are your enemy. They are not your ally. Be careful of people trying to hijack this moment. And you have to beware those charlatans, man. You have to be, again, we welcome anybody and everybody in the tent who is willing to fight back against Trump. But if you are trying to tamp down the enthusiasm of the people who have proven they can lead the resistance and get us out of this mess, if you're nitpicking them and saying, oh, I don't know if I agree with that, I don't think I like how they're doing it, bitch, you have every opportunity in the world. You go set up your own event. You go do your own thing. Let me know how many fucking people you get. And when you don't get as many as Bernie and AOC, you can go to Shut the Fuck Upsville. And you'd be surprised. A lot of people are shocking me in the sense that they're hopping on board and they seem to be genuinely down with the Democratic Tea Party. And then there's others who are pathetic losers who are trying to pretend like this is no big deal and don't look at it. And actually Bernie and AOC are wrong about this, this, and this. And here's what I have to say to those people. Go fuck yourself.
I was going to say he's totally right, by the way, about how it almost feels like that brief couple months. Remember when who's the guy who used to Bill de Blasio? Remember he ran for president, then he dropped out and endorsed Bernie.
Yeah, and
it was like all these establishment people. Not that Bill de Blasio is I know he technically has some pretty aggressive credentials. Whatever.
No, Miki Kant.
Yeah. Either way, it feels it does I'm getting deja vu to that time where it felt like, oh, Bernie is inevitable. He's going to win the Democratic nomination in 2019, 2020, right? Where it was like, there's no stopping this train. Even people like Bill de Blasio were like, yep, I have no choice but to get on board. That's kind of how it feels now. We covered the other day, obviously, Don Lemon being like, shit, I think I'm a progressive. What do you mean? I've always been progressive. What? That, and then we also have the Simone Sanders thing we just referenced. It does feel like there's a real vibe shift happening. And I even said this before the election, guys. I said if only one good thing comes from Donald Trump winning, it will be that it gives the progressives a serious opportunity to take over the Democratic Party again. If Kamala had won this election, I'm going to be honest, it does seem like that kind of old Obama Clinton guard. They would have remained their grips on the Democratic Party for like maybe the rest of our fucking lifetime, at least the next few generations. If there is going to be a democracy going forward, I do think that this genuinely has given the Democrats an opportunity to realign behind Bernie and his message. And even if it's not Bernie, at least someone who he endorses.
I think the Don Lemon example, the Simone Sanders example, even the Brian Tyler Cohen example, right?
Yeah.
It shows that Kyle's point about people's true colors coming out. If you genuinely oppose fascism, if you aren't just reading a script, if you don't just have the politics that you thought were going to be the most beneficial to your career, but actually principles that you believe in and stand by, if you have 1 ounce of conviction based off of the liberal things you said or the leftist things you've said your whole life, you will know that we are in an immediate fucking crossroads here, that people's human civil rights domestically in our country are being shred before our eyes, that we're watching people who have lived in our country legally, whatever that means, for 50 years and then being deported, just fucking ripped off the streets, disappeared into the night, right? Denied representation, denied calls to their lawyers, forced to sleep on coal pile floors, handcuffed to the fucking bench. Do you know what that sounds like to me? Do you know what I think that sounds like to Gavin? It sounds like a fascist fucking police state, right? It sounds like a place I don't want to live. It sounds like a place I want to desperately resist with every single ounce of me, right? And so why would I look at the person who is most successfully leading the resistance to that and be like, I want to throw mud at that guy. I want to tar and feather that guy. I want to belittle that guy. I want to find out every single thing I've ever disagreed with that guy on and scream about it at the top of my lungs. I want to use my platform to be like, you know what? If AOC ever wins re-election, I'm going to just dedicate my life to mocking her and deriding her. It's like, why? How is that productive at all? You know, and I tweeted this out the other day and Kyle seems to agree with me. Oops, this is the wrong screen.
I don't know why that keeps happening.
Yeah, this is a new update on StreamYard that's kind of pissing me off. Sorry, everyone. There we go. I said, gotta laugh at all the folks who pretend it's revolutionary when Jill Stein draws a crowd of 10 people outside a library. But when historic crowds of people rally with Bernie Sanders, they call it a meaningless distraction, right? People that I even liked and have celebrated on this show, right? Like Christian Smalls has been out there doing nothing but poo-poo on Bernie Sanders. And I'm like, bro, like, stop being angry that you're irrelevant and start being excited that something good is happening. You know what I mean? It's crazy. It's the most selfish, just deranged response to the reinvigoration. I'm calling it the Bernie-sance.
Yeah,
but
no, I totally agree. And just to spotlight this, like it's so counterproductive. It's such bullshit. Let's take a look at this. For one, I don't even know if it's true.
it is technically true.
Well, that's awesome, but it's not a competition either. Pro-Palestine protests in New York City have larger crowds than Bernie and AOC combined. Don't be fooled. They're not doing anything special. I mean, they literally are doing something special for a fucking candidate. It is completely historic for them to be accumulating the amount of crowds they're accumulating, and not just behind a milquetoast message of, you know, basic progressivism, but no, Bernie's literally is getting the loudest cheers from the crowd when he chants against Israel, when he says we must cut off funding to the genocidal regime of Israel. Again, not to say that Bernie is perfect on that issue. He's not, right? But to somehow pit pro-Palestinian protesters against the people showing up at the Bernie and AOC rallies, as if there's not a huge, section in the middle of that Venn diagram, right? You don't think that's the same fucking crowd of people, bro? You don't think that a lot of the people, like 90% at least, if not 99% of the people at those Bernie rallies are 100% in solidarity with Palestine, if not the people organizing and attending the exact fucking rallies that you're referencing, bro? Like, I just think that's crazy energy to bring to what is undeniably a moment of optimism for the left-wing progressive movement, if not straight up celebration. Like, I was feeling downright depressed, Zach, like 2-3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago.
Bro, we both
as
were.
The reality of Trump 2.0 set in, as we watched the Constitution get shredded. I feel like better than ever. I feel more optimistic about this fight. And I just can't imagine coming out here to bring this energy of, I'm going to pour cold water on this thing, which clearly is intertwined with even if you think Palestine is 100 times more important, and you're right. I totally understand that. To act like these movements aren't intertwined, that's some wrecker energy. I don't like it.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. I mean, let's address it piece by piece, right? Of course, there was not 300,000 people outside of Bernie Sanders' rally. The venue did not hold even close to 300,000 people. When there was the march in Washington on behalf of Palestine in the weeks after the October 7th attacks and then, the subsequent slaughter of the people of Gaza, the resistance to that was tremendous. It was intense, and it was from all parts of the world. People were coming in to show their solidarity and to oppose what we all knew was going to be an extreme act of barbaristic revenge. Okay. And it was an extreme effort of solidarity from people from all walks of life to get to Washington, D.C. to oppose that. And I believe 300,000 people showed up, and it was tremendous, and it was beautiful, and it was powerful. Okay. That doesn't take anything away from what Bernie Sanders is doing. And I don't know how you can call yourself somebody who's rooted in solidarity, somebody who believes in community, somebody who wants to unite people, and you're going to try and find some weird abstract way to create a margin between the most active supporters of the people of Palestine in America. I think that it's so ridiculous to pretend like people who show up and support their local candidate and try and participate in society, right, are somehow enemies of the people abroad because they are not as informed in our foreign policy. But clearly they are, right? These are people who want to be active.
Yeah. And they'll be like, sorry to cut you off, I'll let you continue, but they'll be like saying, oh, if you cared more about the Amazon unions than you did like what was happening in Yemen at the time, that you were somehow a traitor to the people in Yemen that were being genocided. Like, no, people were talking about both.
100%. And those things can coexist. And while I disagree with Bernie Sanders when he signs on to like a Lindsey Graham resolution, or I disagree with Bernie Sanders when he confirms Marco Rubio in the Senate, the reality is that those are such fringe critiques. Like, why would I bring those up right now? How are those relevant at all to the moment that we're living in as we speak and try and oppose fascism, right? Like, I can concede and be like, yes, if I was in Bernie Sanders' position, I might do that differently. But I can also stand here and be like, here's how Bernie Sanders has stayed in fucking office for as long as he has, guys. And that's the lesson that I've learned, that kind of the hard way, is that the balance between taking the most hardline leftist position often costs you your position in Congress, right? And Bernie Sanders is trying to thread a needle, and he's trying to be a resistance leader. AOC is trying to thread a needle, and she's trying to be a resistance leader. We have to, at times, give these people the benefit of the doubt.
Oh, yeah, I 100% agree with that. There are points in time where I think that, AOC, for example, people in the Justice Democrats, the squad, I do think there are times you can point to where they straight up did fall short. As controversial as it is, we've talked a lot about force the vote. I still do think it would have been a good idea for them to put up a real resistance to the Pelosi's and the Hakeem Jeffries of the world to actually try to. What was that? Yeah, and so did Kyle, right? He called them out for that. So it's not like they're above criticism. It's not like we have to sit here and celebrate everything they do. Obviously not. But yeah, I think there's a real fine line between a productive strategic conversation we're actually trying to pressure people to do an effective strategy like that was, and just nitpicking and being a leftier than thou, annoying asshole, which is the energy I see from most of the Bernie haters at this point. And not to single out Christian Smalls, there's nothing like specifically about him that I find more objectionable than some of the other people that are participating in this sort of rhetoric, but I just happen to have his tweet up here on screen, so might as well reference it again. This is another one that I think is pretty dumb. Bernie Sanders gaslighting people to run as independents so they can give you the Marianne Williamson treatment is just like this last election. So a lot of the Bernie critics, people like Christian Smalls, their issue is that Bernie and people within the Bernie movement run as Democrats and that they're too closely connected to the Democratic Party. Bernie goes out here, encourages people not to run as Democrats, but to run as independents. But that's still not enough. That's still not enough, apparently. Then he says the Dems will crush anyone who goes against the establishment. Our only way out is through a third-party opposition. My dude, nothing has been crushed harder by the Democrats than the third-party opposition. You think the Democrats crushed progressives within the Democratic Party? Wait till you see how they treat third-party candidates. We've watched it on the show happen election cycle after election cycle. It's a big part of the reason why they never get more than 0.03% 3% of the vote, bro. If your point is that we have to do something because like we can't do something if it's going to get crushed by the establishment, then you should have abandoned the third party effort years ago, dude. I'm sorry, but that's setting yourself up for 10 times the fight, 100 times the fight. Like, that's just stupid. And also, you could say that about just about any protest movement, bro. Oh, the establishment's going to crush it anyway, so why even try? Oh, if Bernie ran again, the establishment would just crush him anyway, so why even try? You could say that about climate change protesters. Are you going to go finger wag at a bunch of people that are protesting climate change and be like, oh, you really think you're going to stop climate change, bro? You really think you're going to stop the oil industry from burning a trillion barrels of oil a day to keep the fucking industry going? Like, you could say that to any group of activists, electoral or otherwise. It's not a revolutionary mindset at all. And it's pretty ironic that the people who claim to be the most revolutionary want to come at you with this energy constantly.
Oh, dude, I know. It's crazy. And also, if you look at Ralph Nader's run in 2000, which is the most successful left-wing third-party run of the millennium, right? It's been all downhill for the Green Party in terms of turnout and support. And if you look at the last election, they were saying there's going to be record turnout because of how much everybody hates Joe Biden. And then that didn't happen, right? So you're like, wait, your strategy has worked way less than Bernie Sanders' strategy, and it's not even close. It has been an exponentially worse outcome by a fucking incalculable margin. Okay, Bernie Sanders is filling stadiums of 36,000 people. Jill Stein will draw 25 people to speak at a library. She doesn't even show up. She just zooms in. Everybody's watching a screen of her. You know what I mean? It's crazy. It's totally different. It's not movement building. And look, that's not to take a cheap pot shot at Christian Smalls or Jill Stein. And I've been sitting on this Chris Smalls thing for a while. I didn't want to bring it up, but I do find it extra ironic that he's going out of his way to talk shit on Bernie Sanders touring the country and filling rallies when I happen to know a lot of union guys have big beef with Christian Smalls. And you might be like, wait, how could union guys have big beef with Christian Smalls? He was literally the founder of the first Amazon labor union, the independent worker-led Amazon labor union, right? And then you're like, well, that was actually a few years ago, and I never did hear about them getting their contract negotiated, right? And I was like, look, this guy did a lot of hard work to get that union, passed, and he did all the recruiting, and he really put himself out there, and he slept there night after night, and I never wanted to tear that guy down. And so I was like, let me just sit on this because it's not worthwhile bringing up. But one of the big things that he did that kind of crushed his standing in the union space was he went on this world tour with all the money that he was supposed to use during the union negotiations, right? During the contract negotiation where the rubber really meets the road for these actual workers, right? They have the ability to collective bargain, yes, but now they have to actually do that bargaining. He went to Brazil, he went to Greece, he went to Spain, he went to London, he went to Amsterdam, right? And so he did exactly what Bernie Sanders is doing, but now he wants to antagonize Bernie Sanders for going on a speaking tour when Bernie Sanders also still shows up and votes. He still also represents the people of Vermont. You know what I mean? It's just like that's giving op shit. That's giving like I want to be an antagonist. That means that's like I'm trying to be a contrarian. You know what I mean? That's not somebody that has an authentic, legitimate grievance when you literally did the exact same thing to lesser results.
Yeah. No, it seems like there's a huge amount of bitterness within this faction of, again, quote unquote leftists, as Kyle called them, fake leftists, who want to, use this moment, as he said, to sabotage and to come out here and hijack what should be a clear win for the fucking left, a clear fucking win for the progressive movement. And I think that's just the obvious takeaway, right? And you can also, by the way, I think it's fair to say, as someone in chat said, like electoral politics might not be what ultimately saves us from where we are right now. But even if that's your opinion, you should still be thinking Bernie, because who the fuck else is getting this amount of people excited and involved and enthusiastic about fighting back? Because guess what? A lot of those people at the rallies, they're not just showing up to a rally. They're not just showing up to chant and hold a sign and cheer and see Bernie. No, they're meeting other like-minded people there. They're networking. They're organizing. There was a viral part of AOC's speech at a recent rally where she literally made everyone in the crowd turn around, talk to their fellow comrade in the auditorium, exchange information. And she's like, these are your allies. These are the people who you need to network with to fight back against the siege of not only our government, but all of our human rights. So I'm sorry, but even if you're an anti-electoral activist who's like, fuck electoral politics, people just need to get together and do mutual aid. Well, it seems like this is a pretty good, way to cultivate that, atmosphere, right? You want a bunch of like-minded left-wing people who care about their community getting together to cultivate an atmosphere of resistance and activist energy. I cannot imagine a better vehicle for that than these rallies. And it goes back to what I've always said on the show in defense of electoral politics, which is that people always try to delineate electoral politics and non-electoral activism, when in reality, the truth is that a rising electoral tide lifts all the activist boats. Those activist boats are going to fucking sink if there's not a rising electoral tide, if people don't give a shit. And unfortunately, you do need electoral politics to get most normies to give a shit, because they're not just going to go and, fucking spend their time at the soup kitchen or helping out people that need help. No, they need to have a reason to get involved.
Oh, 100%. Look, people need to stop feeling so isolated, right? And I think that's the first thing that Bernie accomplished. He was like, everybody feels so defeated, so nihilistic. They're apathetic at a time where we cannot accept apathy, right? He's shaking us awake in the death zone, guys. He's saying, you are not alone. That's a great example of shaking people's hands. It reminds me of church, guys. Did you know that if you didn't go to church, you probably don't know this, but if you did, you probably remember. And that's a part of where they'll be like, oh, shake hands with the person standing next to you. And then you say like, peace be with you and with you as well and all that shit. And I only went to church like 5 times and I remember that. And do you know why church matters to people, guys? It ain't the Bible. It's the community element. The fact that it united people. It kept them together for so long in American history and in human history, period. Where you got your socializing done was in church. That was how you forged community. That was where you would find somebody that would help you chop down a tree, and then you would help him, butcher a deer that he shot. And he doesn't know how to butcher like you do. Do you know what I'm saying? That's how you built community. You would help each other out. If somebody got sick, you'd be like, oh, here, take my horse to go ride into town and get some medicine, right? We need that in today's society.
Look out the door if you hear an ambulance. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there, sir. The Vanguard will be there. Be there.